We are recording tonight this workshop, and we will post it on the WSU Extension website. So if you have to leave early or you know someone else that would benefit from this information, you can find the workshop recording there. We're going to start the evening with asking you all a few questions about your interest and knowledge in conservation easements. And then we're going to report out the results from a similar farm landowner survey conducted recently here in Southwest Washington. Next up, we'll have a short presentation from Jeff Swotek about conservation easements in general. And this should get us all thinking about our properties and what opportunities we may have. And finally, we've gathered a small panel of local farmers who have firsthand experience with easements. And they will share their experiences and answer your questions about the process. We'll have a question period in between each of our segments, and I'd like to request that we all put ourselves on mute until the question and answer periods, but please do speak up and ask questions because after all, this night is for you. We're here to give you information. And one final note, please give us your feedback on this event. What worked tonight, what you'd like to see next time. I posted a link to an evaluation form in the chat, and I will do that again at the end of the evening. So please follow that link at some point tonight and let us know how this worked for you. So we'll start off with some introductions. My name is Sierra Smith. I'm an agriculture educator for WSU Extension, Thurston County. I'm going to moderate tonight. And there's several individuals and entities that are working together to get this information out to you, out to landowners. And I will share my screen now here for some introduction slides so that you know who all is involved and why we're all here. All right. Stephen, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Sierra, for that introduction. And one moment. I work with WSU Extension, Thurston County, and really happy to be here tonight talking about conservation easements and learning about conservation easements. WSU Extension is all about these three areas with the pictures, empowering farmers through supporting one another and addressing questions. We are kind of our tagline is helping the community to address community problems, not necessarily just bringing information to solve problems. On-farm research and demonstrations through applied research to address local problems, and then our gold standard is direct impact, whether it's dollars or acres or resources conserved. But to the point of the topic tonight, conservation easements, those I just put up the three areas that I think are important for easements and for farmers to consider these and rural landowners to consider these. We have a serious problem with farmland loss in this county. So if we can utilize tools alternative to selling that property when it comes time for a farmer to move on or somebody wants to make a change with their land, we're looking for alternatives to losing that land to production. I like the term multifunctional. I think farms can do more than one thing. So protecting habitat and being independent, producing farms are both possible on the same property. And then lastly, farm profitability. Well, the other thing I'll just say, what terrifies me is the species loss that we're facing globally right now. So, utilizing farmland to protect habitat is really important while keeping those farms productive. And lastly, farm profitability. If we can create an alternative revenue source for farmers and rural landowners, such as using full cost accounting techniques, getting compensated for carbon or clean water or open space, whatever it may be, that's a really neat possibility. So that's what gets me excited about the workshop. I'll pass the torch.
All right, thanks. Next up, we have the Thurston Conservation District, Sarah or Nora.
Yeah, thanks, Sierra. I appreciate that. I just want to check in real quick. Can you hear me with my camera on? Perfect. Thanks so much. So I'm also really excited to be here and have this conversation. And with all of our community partners on board to share resources, but to hear from our community, how we can support objectives. And so the Conservation District is a non-regulatory support organization. We provide technical assistance and education to farmers, ranchers, and landowners. We are really focused on preservation of working lands. And so that's both making sure that we have farmland, actual ground in the future to farm, as well as preserving farmers, which is a specific skill set and livelihood and culture, and preserving the agricultural business too. So agricultural viability and the agricultural economy. And then, of course, so similarly to WSU, it's healthy soil and water for generations to come. Those fit together hand in hand with thriving farmland, thriving ecosystems, a thriving landscape. So conservation easements in particular are one of these tools to marry these sort of shared objectives, where we have protection of some of these shared natural resources. In Thurston County, with such a small geography, we have such a layered landscape where all of our parcels and properties have such a multifunctional benefit, like Stephen shared earlier. We support access to affordable farmland as we continue to urbanize down the I-5 corridor. The value of land skyrockets. And while that's great on some end, it does make farmland and accessing farmland for new farmers unattainable. And so easements as a tool to fairly compensate landowners and also make farmland accessible to the next generation of farmers. And then making conservation accessible and affordable for our whole community. This is, again, another way to pool resources and tools and expertise of a variety of organizations and experts to the same table to have conversation with landowners and really customize an approach to support them in their goals and objectives, and hopefully, impact the lifetime of the land. So happy to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, next up we have the Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS. I don't know if I saw Nick on the call. Nick Vera, are you out there? Do we have anyone representing NRCS tonight? Jeff, we might throw this one to you by default.
Okay, well then I'll have to send an NRCS a bill for my time.
It sounds good.
For those of you who don't know, I retired, but anyway, this is old hat for me. So basically, the NRCS is focused on productive lands, maintaining the productivity of our agricultural lands. And that dates back to the origin of the Dust Bowl and our founding. And that catastrophic event impacted the very viability of our national security and national future. So we are keenly focused on maintaining the productivity of our land so we can feed our people and thus be a successful society. Number two, healthy environment, making sure that our natural resources are good quality water, soil, water, plants, animal, air, people, and the energy, making sure that we have a healthy environment, and with a healthy environment, we maintain productivity and a viable community. Conservation easements, they keep productive lands working. They provide habitat for critical species and also provide other natural resource conservation benefits. And some of those you'll hear me talk a lot about these in more of expanded fashion a little bit later in the presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. Way to wing a slide you haven't ever seen before. Appreciate that. All right. Oops. Chris Chapeau from Thurston County is going to talk about their involvement tonight.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. I'm Christina Chapeau. I'm a senior planner with Thurston County in the community planning section. And, agricultural land and easements for the county, they're, one of the pieces that make the county what it is. We have state mandates on agricultural lands and maintaining viable farmlands and open space and conserving for long-term farm use. Uh, we also have requirements by the state and other entities to preserve our habitat and our natural resources. And farms are part of our natural resources. It's not just um, the critters that are out there, but also the soil and the water and the food that's produced off of those farmlands that is considered a natural resource. And then, of course, maintaining our rural character and our open space. It's very much part of our of the Thurston County culture, and we're striving to continually make sure we're maintaining those rural characters. Um, Farming is part of our economic engine in Thurston County and making sure that we have a healthy economy. So maintaining that thriving local agricultural industry is essential for the community as a whole and making sure that we're sustainable. Providing the preservation and restoration incentives in lieu of regulations. Most people might not think so, but the government doesn't necessarily like to regulate. It's a lot of work. And if we can get preservation through incentives and non-regulatory work, that's even better. And then protecting our natural resources, maintaining our open space and our rural character. It's kind of the three main things that we're always looking at when we're doing planning at the county level.
Great. Thank you, Chris. All right. Last up tonight, we have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Mary Root or Nick George.
It'll be me. So I'm Mary Root. I'm the division manager for environmental assessment and restoration out of our Washington Fish and Wildlife office here in Lacey. When I was asked about what the objectives might be relating to conservation easements, three came to mind, and these are the ones I'm putting forward. Conservation is an obvious one. Collaboration and community are kind of the three core tenets, I think, of it. For conservation, that's an obvious one, protecting species and their habitats, of course, for future generations. That's part of our mission. Collaboration, it seems like a no-brainer, but just highlighting the fact that we share more in common than we think. That provides a lot of opportunity for us to work together and try to find those win-wins. I think that's incredibly important for us all to be successful. The other thing is just community, that part of us being successful is that we all live and work here. So coming up with solutions that work for us all over the long term is really the only way we'll all succeed in some of our commonality and shared goals. In terms of the question that was asked is, why does U.S. Fish and Wildlife care about farm and farmlands? So I answered that question with our mission, because I feel like part of it is that we want to work with others, the first part of our mission, to conserve, protect, and enhance fish and wildlife. But it's for the continuing benefit of the American people. So that's the future generations part. I think what's really important to highlight is that 70% of the land ownership in the country is in privately owned. So it behooves the Fish and Wildlife Service to find ways to work through conservation easements and other voluntary efforts with private landowners to do long-term conservation in this way, in a voluntary way. So I also think it's good for us to acknowledge and recognize that farmers and farms provide a lot of great habitat for species, and for them, I think most farmers are great stewards of their land. They know their land better than anyone else. So it makes sense from our agency's perspective to identify ways to help and promote and support conservation easements on working lands. Thanks. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. So we just heard from a great sampling of government entities here in Thurston County that are interested in helping folks with conservation easements. There's also a ton of non-government entities, nonprofits out there that are similarly working, and we will discuss that in future iterations of these workshops. The next thing that we're going to do tonight is ask you a little bit about why you're here, what you know about easements, what you want to know about easements, and then report back on what other landowners in Southwest Washington said to these questions and a few more. So I'm going to turn it over here to Sam Busen, who is a graduate student at OSU, correct? No. Okay. So I'm going to stop with my introduction and just turn it over to Sam. Thanks.
Okay, hi, I'm Sam Busen. I'm a PhD candidate at Washington State University, Vancouver. So you're real close, just a little bit too far south. And so I have a very short, should be hopefully no more than 5 minutes. Oh, did I cut out there? Did I cut out there? I think froze. Okay, hopefully short survey, no more than 5 minutes, which totally voluntary, you don't have to take it. But it would be great if you did. And it's just kind of a way to get you thinking about some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about, and then also kind of help place your thoughts in kind of the larger narrative that I'm going to talk about in a minute. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat. And if you can go ahead and take that, hopefully it'll be quick. And some of you may recognize the questions. I'll leave that there for the moment.
So we're going to be quiet here for the next 5 minutes or so. While we give time for everybody to take this quick survey over in the chat box.
Yeah.
If anybody's having technical problems with it, speak up, ask Samurai, and we'll see what we can do.
And just note that the link that you're answering is the one that Samantha Buston just placed, not the one that was on the evaluation that was up top. So just
yeah, the new one.
How do I find that link? Where is it on the screen?
So if you go down to the bottom of your screen, there should be a button that says chat.
Yes.
If you click that, there should be a little box that pops up.
Oh, very good. Got it.
Yep. And
okay.
then is the link that says Qualtrics in it, WSU Qualtrics.
Got it.
And I should mention all of your answers.
Posted.
Oh, sorry.
So but specifically one that Samantha just posted, because the other Qualtrics one is the workshop evaluation.
Oh shoot, they're both Qualtrics. I didn't realize that. Sorry. Yeah, and I should mention that this is all confidential. Your name will not be connected to your response.
We'll give everybody about another minute here. Most people feeling done? Yeah. Sam, why don't you go ahead and start, and people can finish up as they're hearing you start your presentation.
Sounds good. So before I get started, I'm going to drop one more link in the chat, and that is a link that will hopefully work to take you to a copy of the 2019 survey that I put out so that you can follow along as I talk. Please let me know if it doesn't. Otherwise, I think I can also attach a file. In the meantime, I will share my screen. Okay. We will, going to make myself small. We'll go ahead and okay, can everybody see the full screen? Yes. Cool. Okay, so I guess I'll start. I will time myself to make sure I don't run over time. So thanks everyone for taking the survey just now. I hope it was a nice opportunity to think about some of the topics that we're going to discuss later on in the workshop today. The questions that you answered were actually part of a larger survey that I circulated in 2019 by the name of Survey of Grazing Practices in Southwest Washington. So as I'm talking, you can go ahead and think about how your responses to the very mini survey that you just took fit into some of the larger concepts that I'm talking about, or fit into some of the larger data that I'm talking about. I can get this to go. There we go. So the survey that I'm talking about was actually part of an even larger project that is looking at the sociological, economic, and ecological aspects of how working lands can contribute to conservation and vice versa, with the ultimate goal of protecting working lands and keeping them in production. And so the individual goals of the survey were to understand perceptions of conservation incentives, barriers to conservation interest, and agency relationships among farmers and ranchers in Western or Southwest Washington. And then also, we're hoping that the survey can help inform the Thurston County Habitat Conservation Plan. So I started developing the survey in 2018. It was reviewed by a focus group of farmers and ranchers in fall of 2018, and they helped check over the questions for clarity and make sure that I was using the right vocabulary to talk about things, and make sure that I was asking the questions I thought I was asking. And it was reviewed by WSU's internal review board in 2019, and then I was able to start distributing it April to July in 2019. And there was an online version similar to what you just took, and also a mailed version. And that's my partner Niall helping me stuff envelopes. Poor guy. So we had a total of 133 responses, which was a pretty good response rate. 89 of those people had some form of grazing livestock. And so that's the data that I'm going to show you today. So the majority of respondents, oh, actually, before I really get rolling, I want to mention that I have the question numbers up here. I'm going to jump around a little bit, so hopefully that'll kind of help you keep track of where I'm going if you're following along on the survey document. And also, I won't be able to cover every single thing that was on the survey. There's a lot more than what I'm going to talk about today. So, but there will be a document that we will circulate to everyone that has a breakdown of the responses from each and every question on the survey. So keep your eyes out for that. But in any case, the distribution of people through the counties, the majority of respondents were in Lewis County, Pierce County, or Thurston County. This was a multiple choice or a multiple option question. So if people had land in more than one county, they could select that. And the majority of respondents were quite small farms, less than 20 acres. And to me, this fits with what I know of the landscape that we work in. So it made sense to me. And then kind of likely dovetailing with that, we deliberately didn't ask about net profits. We only asked about gross sales, just because we didn't want to offend anybody, but the majority of respondents sell less than $12,500 product, or excuse me, $12,500 a product each year. So, and both of those questions have pretty large implications when we're thinking about conservation on working lands. And these are definitely things to keep in mind. I also asked about a variety of demographic variables like age, gender, education level. I'm only going to show you the results from age, and the reason for that will become clear in a little bit. But the majority of respondents were between the ages of 50 to 69, with some on the younger end and some on the older end. And there were no respondents were less than 30 years old, which was not really that much of a surprise. So now we get to the really interesting stuff. So this question, like the one that you just took, asked people to rate their level of interest in various incentive programs. And so I'm just sort of setting the scene, so to speak, at the moment. And I'll show you the incentive along the vertical axis here. And then the depth of the color will indicate how strongly people felt about one incentive or another. And then people who were interested in the incentive will be on this side of the line. People who are not interested will be on this side of the line. And I do just want to state that there's no judgment implied at all of whether they were interested in a particular incentive or not. So this is where you can kind of be thinking about your thoughts about those questions and how your thoughts fit into a larger landscape. So I just want to kind of go through and highlight some specific incentives. So the two that were the least surprising to me in terms of how people felt about them were tax incentives. You can see they were the most highly rated incentive. And then the lowest rated incentive was selling property for restoration and conservation. Not too much of a surprise there. People don't want to sell their property. The biggest surprise for me was how little interest there was in terms of registry or branding programs. And I should also mention, if you're not looking at the survey right now, there was more context given. There wasn't just these random words, but there was some concern from people who have looked at the survey sense that maybe the way that was phrased wasn't as clear. I was thinking something along the lines of like salmon safe certification, programs that you can certify your beef as salmon safe or things along those lines. But so if there's time at the end, I'd like to get your guys' thoughts about how you interpreted that question, because it's the same phrasing as I used in 2019. So, but we'll get to that, but be thinking about that. And then since it is a conservation easement workshop, I want to highlight the conservation easements. And conservation easements were some of the more highly rated incentives, but there were also lots of people who weren't so interested in them. But I'm kind of assuming since you guys are here tonight, most of you probably fell on this end of the line. So that's just kind of all of the incentives shown together so you can see a little bit more clearly. Okay, so now we're going to do something similar for people's perceptions of barriers. So this question asks you to rank your perception of a potential barrier from 1 being not a barrier to 5 being extremely strong barrier. Again, we'll have the names on this side of the line. And then if people felt that it was an extremely strong barrier, they're on this side of the black line here. If people felt that it wasn't really a barrier, they're on this side. And again, with our neutral category sort of in the middle. And I'll just highlight a few that I thought were interesting. So the financial assistance barriers, either not enough assistance available or conservation is too expensive, were some of the more highly ranked barriers. But I personally kind of expected them to be ranked more highly given how people felt about the financial incentives in the previous slide. So that was kind of interesting. And then the next barrier that I want to highlight is loss of development rights if listed species are found on their land. This seemed to be a pretty polarizing issue. There were a lot of people who felt really strongly that, that is a pretty strong barrier. And then there are a lot of people who didn't really think it was a barrier. There were other questions on the larger survey related to this issue. And even with that, there were still people who took the extra comment section to tell me that they do see loss of development rights as a very large barrier. So it is something that a lot of people feel really strongly about. Okay, so now I'm getting into some of the analysis bits that I'm doing. And the analysis work that I'm currently involved in is taking some of the characteristics that I told you about earlier, like gross sales, farm size, that kind of thing, and then also the demographic variables that I mentioned, and relating them to different incentives and barriers to see if there's differences in how people felt about those based on those grouping variables. So I'm going to show you age, and I picked that one just because it was pretty easy to break it down, and there were enough people in each category that I'm not violating anybody's privacy by showing you these graphs. So once again, I'm going to show you a similar plot to the incentives one that I showed you earlier, but this time I've broken it down by the 3 age groups, and then the incentives will be on this axis, and the colors indicate how strongly people feel about things. I can get this to go. There we go. So the first two I want to highlight, tax incentives and conservation easements, were actually the ones where I did not detect any strong differences between age groups, which was kind of interesting. So tax incentives just seemed to be popular, just kind of across the board. And conservation easements also were fairly popular, you can see here, and there just weren't really any strong differences between the age groups. There are a few that you can see in the bands of color, but largely not super strong differences. The other 4, however, all had differences between age groups. And so now I need to zoom in and look at each individual age group and how it relates to the other 2. So I'm just going to give you one example of how that looks. So if we zoom in on-farm cost share, so I detected strong differences between the youngest group, the ages 30 to 49, and the oldest, 70 plus, in terms of how they felt about on-farm cost share. And there weren't any significant differences between the youngest and the middle group, or the middle and the older group. So it just sort of seems like the middle group is kind of in the middle, which kind of makes sense. So it does kind of look like if you wanted to encourage people to take part in on-farm cost share, for example, maybe you target that at younger farmers. So this kind of thing can tell us who to focus our efforts on. And so I'm going through and doing that with all of the different characteristics that I've mentioned, and some other ones as well. And so far it looks like farm size and age are most important in determining how people feel about incentives. And so far, farm size, gross sales, the percent of your income that your farm represents, your age and your gender are important in barrier perception. But so far, I've just been looking at each incentive and each barrier individually, and each potential characteristic that could explain perceptions individually. And so now I'm moving into analyzing the incentives, barriers, explanatory variables, and other sections of the survey that I'm not even going to talk about today in a more holistic way, sort of looking at them together and looking at how they affect each other. So stay tuned for that. There's a lot more coming. So some preliminary conclusions. There was a lot of interest in various incentives to do conservation, and farmers are interested in doing conservation. I forget exactly who said it in the introduction, but farmers know their land better than anybody, and you guys care about your land, and people want to be able to do conservation, but financial assistance is needed because it does seem like that is the best incentive and one of the largest barriers. So again, we will be circulating a summary document. I have to double check with Stephen and Sierra about exactly how we're going to do that. But so if you want to know about any specific questions that you're seeing on that survey and you want to look at a breakdown of the results, you can check that document. I'd like to thank my advisors, Cheryl Schultz, our project partners, Stephen Bremmel, Sarah Hammond, Christina Sanders, and Marty Cheney, the various organizations that I've been lucky enough to work with, my funding source, which is Western Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, the producer focus group who helped me refine the survey. So Fred Colfin, who's on the call today. Thank you, Fred. Kevin Jensen, Maynard Maloney, Chris Shiplet. I'm sorry. And then there were a few others whose names I didn't quite get, but there were other people involved as well. And then many other people who have helped me with the survey. I would also like to respectfully acknowledge that WSU Vancouver is located on the homeland of the Shinnecoin and Taidapam people and the Cowlitz Indian tribe. With that, I'll happily take any questions. And if you don't have time to ask your questions today, always feel free to email me.
Thank you for that, Sam. I appreciate it. We will do a minute of silence here. I will do a minute of silence and allow people to unmute and ask questions to Sam. And after that, we'll jump into Jeff Swotek's conservation easement presentation. So if anybody has any questions for Sam, and I might start with one, Sam, what was the intent of your survey? What was the motivation for conducting that survey?
Motivation was to sort of understand how people felt, farmers felt about the various incentives and barriers, and also to, mainly just to get their input. There's been a lot of work showing that when you give people an opportunity to have input from the start, when we're thinking about any conservation regulations or even non-regulatory incentives, if you involve people from the start, then it tends to be a much more successful program. And so that's part of what we were hoping to do.
Thank you. Will you go ahead and stop your screen share too?
Oh, yeah, sorry. If no one has a question, can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead, Sam.
I mentioned that there were some concerns about the registry and branding program incentive and the way that I phrased that question. For the farmers and ranchers on the call, how did you interpret that question?
Hi, this is Brett Colvin. I think I interpreted exactly what you meant it to be. I didn't read anything other than that in it.
Great, that's really good to know. Do others feel similarly?
Yes, this is Robert McIntosh. I didn't get it at first because I saw that word branding and I thought that's some kind of a marketing term that I don't know about because I'm not a marketing person. But then I looked and I thought, and I realized, okay, I'm a tree farmer. So this is like the certification programs for forest products. And then I realized what it was. It was branding that confused me.
Okay, that's good to know. But you did realize what it was
Right.
in the end.
Good feedback.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Yeah,
I think I'm
something
gonna.
for me to keep in mind.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it. I think we're gonna jump along to Jeff's presentation here. Jeff, are you ready to start sharing your screen?
Yep,
All right.
we'll get going. Hang on
I'll
a
get out of
second.
your way.
All right. Appreciate it. Okay, let me get going here. Beginning. Okay, great. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight on this beautiful night to talk about easements. I want to say a special thanks to those of you that are farmers, ranchers, and tree farmers producing the food and fiber for our community. You know, these times have been pretty crazy during the pandemic, but it all points to how valuable each and every one of you are. So we salute you and thank you for the work that you've done. Tonight, I'm going to talk about conservation easements. And if there's anything that will pull me out of retirement, it's this topic, because I really, really enjoy talking about it. I've had the privilege of working with many of you over the years. I've worked with NRCS for 33, USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service for 33 and a half years, and retired in December of 2019. But through my whole career, I've had an opportunity to work with landowners on easements and easement discussions. And I've really seen some incredible positive experiences by landowners. It's well planned out process that you know is, like I say, can be quite positive transformation, and I've had the privilege of seeing that with many clients. So tonight there are many long-range business or estate planning tools in the toolbox for landowners, one of which is the conservation easement, and we'll talk a little bit about those that particular tool here tonight. When we talk about conservation easements on agricultural land, you know, the first question that comes to mind is, what is land? You know, outside of the obvious, which you can see and that you know, there are other things that are actually, land is actually also a collection or a bundle of rights and ecological assets, which may add additional value to land. Some examples of rights and ecological assets include development rights, water rights, mineral rights, wetlands, unique soils and geology, unique plant and animal communities and habitats. It's this collection of or bundle of rights that's very specific to the property and may vary from parcel to parcel. Oftentimes, we're very familiar with things like development rights and water rights, as those are the things that we know, and mineral rights for that matter. But things like unique soils and geology and wetlands and plant and animal communities and habitats may be something that we're less familiar with. Some of these assets, ecological assets or rights, can enhance the value of an easement quite significantly. So what is a conservation easement and how is it defined? That's a really good question. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this, going online and searching for a good definition. I didn't find one, of course. So I kind of put one together myself that really captures the wide variety of easement products out there available to the landowner. And so let's take a look at the definition for a second. What is a conservation easement? Conservation easement is a voluntary legal agreement between a landowner and a land trust or government agency through which certain specified rights or ecological assets to the property are purchased, credited, or transferred for a period of time, most often in perpetuity, in order to protect the conservation values of the land enrolled. Let's take an example, for instance. What most people are familiar with in South Sound is the purchase of development rights. That's where a parcel, let's say 40 acres, is zoned 1 house per 5. It has a potential total of 8 development rights. When an easement is purchased on that, landowner is willing to and interested in selling an easement on that property to extinguish the development rights, then those development rights have a value, and that value is what the landowner receives in a cash benefit. Basically, how is the value of an easement determined? There are many methods in which the value of an easement is determined, and knowing what method is used is important. That's the tough thing. There are a lot of easement products out there, and what appraisals are used from various different fund sources. And so it requires a bit of education so you can maximize the potential of your particular property or parcel. Keep in mind too that one important thing is that not all of the land ever needs to be enrolled in an easement. You can take a portion of your property, do it or take it out for a test drive and see how you like an easement, and then make the decision of whether or not to implement an easement on all of your property. Also too, easements are, like I say, there's a lot of easement products out there, and you can pick and choose easement products that match your goals and objectives on the landscape. Like I say, this is extremely focused on a landowner-driven decision. And it's been fascinating to watch people go through all of these steps in determining whether or not that's a good fit for them. One of the most common methods of determining the value of an easement is by a market appraisal of the rights or ecological assets the landowner wishes to voluntarily enroll in the easement, and the area of the land enrolled and the term of the easement. Like I say, most often the term is in perpetuity. Like I said, the reason to enroll in an easement is very deeply personal for the individual. It can be driven by financial reasons. It can be driven by the desire to preserve family history. I can tell you that my grandfather's ranch in North Idaho on the Pend Oreille River was a beautiful, beautiful property. Unfortunately, my grandfather sold it, and today it is subdivided into many small parcels. And so a portion of our family legacy in that state looks a lot different than it would. And also too, for a lot of people, that preservation of that family legacy is important. But we all do know that agriculture is a business. And one key thing for preserving agricultural land is the ability for agriculture to be profitable. If that goes hand in hand. But for many over the years, I've seen landowners who couldn't raise the funds to do a value-added endeavor, couldn't meet a balloon payment on a loan, or buy a sibling out that wants to sell their share after their share of the property after the parents pass away. So easements are a way of tapping into the equity, but still maintaining ownership and use of the land. So what is a good step for learning more about easements? Contacting a land trust is a great first step. And that's contacting a land trust of your choosing, as they would ultimately put the application and financial package together and hold and administer an easement for many, many programs that are out there. Like I have told so many people, I said, you want to really focus on talking to as many land trusts as possible to find a good match for you. A land trust that has similar goals and objectives to yours, because this is like a marriage. And what I always told people is, I don't think you want me to pick your spouse, nor would I want you to pick mine as well. So talking to as many land trusts and finding a good fit where the organizational fit matches your goals and objectives for not only today, but the future is so important. In addition, you can, like I say, talk to a variety of local, state, and federal agencies and organizations that are out there, all good sources of information of all the different easement products, potential values of easements, and don't necessarily discount looking at an easement, but educate yourself, because value, as you saw from the previous slide, is tied to the market. And for some of the easement products, I've seen some pretty significant value out there that can be had while still maintaining the ownership and the future use of your property that best suits your operation. Some easement considerations. One of the things that I always tell landowners is, if you're contemplating an easement, I want you to walk into the assessor's office and say, okay, if I did this, if I extinguished development rights on this piece, or and entered into an easement that's in perpetuity that does that, what kind of implications does that have for my property taxes? That's a real important thing. You want to go in fully informed on an easement. One of the things I always tell people is you know, so you want to do an easement, I'm going to talk you out of it, because I want you to really think about this decision, because it is an important decision. It's a real estate transaction. It's recorded and goes with the deed of the property. So you want to be mindful of not only today, but the future. You also want to know what the tax advantages are of an easement, you know, in terms of, you know, not only, you know, your personal income tax, but how you're going to manage any lump sum of funds that arrive on your doorstep after an easement's closed. How will a conservation easement impact future value and use and sale? That's really important. You know, especially on permanent easements. When you think of permanent easements, perpetuity is a long time, and it's so hard to wrap your head around that. So thinking into the future, you know, and planning for it is so important. You know, if your land is so rocky, for instance, and it's got rocks, you know, boulders and rocks, it's say Spanaway or Bald Hill, sandy, you know, Bald Hill, Stony Loam, what have you, you're not going to raise potatoes. So not being able to crop is a safe bet. So that's the beauty behind easements and matching products to the landscape and to your future plans. Also, too, what impact is future sale? Most of the easements are recorded easements, and those typically go with the property dependent on the term. And so you can sell the property, but the new owner will still have to abide by the terms and the conditions of the easement that you put on the parcel. So you want to be mindful of that in the future. Or say, for instance, you had some grandkids that want to build a house, you know, even think of those types of things where you leave portions of the property outside of the easement. Can additional rights or ecological assets be enrolled in the future easement on the same land? This is where, you know, I introduced the concept of layering. And say, for instance, you wanted to do a development rights and easement in perpetuity is extinguishing your development rights. Then, you know, can you go on to look at other aspects of that bundle of rights and ecological assets that may come into play that you may want additional layers of easements on in the future, and discuss that and see if the programs that you're involved with would allow that. is it possible to opt out of an existing easement? And the experience thus far has been it's extraordinarily difficult. So that's why spending the time and thinking this through is so important. It's better to make a good decision than to make a bad one. One of the things I have typically always done if you're considering an easement is give the landowner a box of stakes and some flags and let them set the corners and move the corners as many times as they want. And then when they feel like they've got everything where they want, then that's the time to do a survey of the easement boundary. And so that process can take, like I say, a long, long time. How long does it take to get an easement from application to closing? It's not a quick process. So if you need a ton of money real quick, it's not a quick process. So you want to plan ahead and think ahead, because easements will take time, like I said, like any real estate transaction, so it's not quick. What are the details in the easement deed and who is responsible for what? This is where when you're considering an easement and you're working with a partner, whether it be a land trust that's going to hold the easement or a government agency that's going to hold the easement, this is where you'd want to actually get an upfront draft of the warranty easement deed to see what that looks like. What are the terms and conditions? So you can see that in black and white before you go too deep into that. What is the potential value of the easement? There are some, like I say, a lot of experience now, more and more people have in these parts on working lands easements to be able to determine what approximate value you could expect from the various easements that you might be looking at. And if you're looking at an easement being held by a unit of government, say the federal government or so forth, then quite often their programs have a set value. What is the potential value of the easement? Like I said earlier, like it is you got to know the method of how the value is being determined. It may be a set amount per acre in terms of dollars and cents, or credits, or something like that. So, or it may be a actual appraisal, a market appraisal. One that in the earlier example that I gave you, one market appraisal done on the land as it currently stands, that 40 acres with 8 development rights, that has a value. Another value would be another assessment or appraisal would be done with the land with the development rights removed. And so the difference between the two appraisals is the value of the development rights, and that's how that's determined. But you want to know that up front and how that appraisal is going to be done, or what method is used to determine it. Value determination, value determination and timing. What I've often told clients is that 2008 would have been a very bad year to do an easement, because land values were low, appraisals would be low, easement values would be low. The beauty behind being a private citizen is that I'm telling you all of this from my perspective of what I've seen and learned over time, and it's really, really important to be dialed into these things, because the timing on an easement sometimes could be everything in terms of maximizing your land value potential. For most landowners, land is often their retirement. And so like any asset, you want to maximize your return on your asset. And the beauty behind easements for future generations is that conservation easements do make the land more affordable. It also, conservation easements allow a landowner to take control of their future as opposed to having be otherwise. Again, the last point, think about the future and plan for the future. You want a farm stand, you want to build a home for a family member. That's the stuff that you leave out of an easement. You do not include in the easement. So you can set the boundaries of your easement, and that is really important. So you want to think, it's a family discussion, it's a futuristic kind of planning activity, and you want to do it collaboratively with all interested parties in mind. Let's talk about opportunities. It does have many existing conservation easements on working agricultural lands. With the listing of several wildlife species and the development pressure, landowners here in Thurston County have lots of opportunities for working lands easements that meet the needs of the landowner and protect the rural character of the unique flora and fauna of our landscape. Well, you're probably wondering, yeah, I've heard about these conservation easements, what are my chances? Well, I can tell you that Thurston County working lands easements very well on a statewide scale for USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. There hasn't been a single one that hasn't been funded because we locally tick all these boxes. We have here in Thurston County a lot of prime and unique farmland soils, and that is very much an important ranking criteria for many programs. We do have a lot of development pressure, and we do have a fairly high rate of agricultural land conversion. Easements do provide multiple benefits. I mean, hey, if it wasn't for the folks that work the land, we'd be in a world of hurt as far as our wildlife populations, as most of our working lands support a tremendous amount of wildlife species for sure. And so in addition to farming for your profit, you also have, like I say, giving so many community benefits. Proximity to protected lands and other farms and infrastructure is something that we have here in Thurston County. And we do have, as well as everybody knows, at-risk species and habitat. One key that ranking criteria that's really important for at least federal agencies, and I think others, is land trusts that submit an application to have a track record that's positive in managing easements. And we're very fortunate here locally to have many local and regional land trusts that are just outstanding as far as working with landowners and sponsoring successful easements. The percent of agricultural land to be protected versus the parcel size, that is sometimes a ranking consideration. However, very much not as much so as some of these other criteria. Locally, we had an easement as small as 5 acres of working agricultural land. So that gives you a sense of size. Really doesn't matter as long as you have very strong attributes and that were very important in that particular piece, had critical at-risk species and or habitats, and that easily, like I say, that alone was the driver behind that easement being awarded funding. Protecting cultural resources. There are in some parts of the county, some parts of the state, there are cultural resource archaeological sites that are really important. And that also makes for a competitive easement. Oftentimes easement applications, if they're structured in a way that landowner wants to prohibit further subdivision of the land, selling off pieces of the land, keeping it whole rather than that, sometimes, like I say, makes an easement more competitive. And adds to protected agriculture areas. We do have long-term ag areas, and like I say, easements that add to that, ensure that viability of that long-term ag area. So conservation easements, like I say, are a great tool. Very much, like I say, I've seen tremendous results for folks that have participated in those. It's not for everybody. You want to give it some thought. Like I said to many times before, I've seen landowners take anywhere from 7 minutes to 7 years to make that decision. And taking the time to look at this option. I've, like I say, living here for so many years, I've seen people that would love to have had this opportunity, but had to sell off because they needed money for this, that, and the other thing. But realizing that it is a tool, a financial planning tool for the future, where that you can really take charge of your future, and like I say, have a good opportunity to ensure the productive land, agricultural land, is there for future generations. With that, I'll take any questions that folks might have, and I will remove the slide there.
Jeff, I want to say thank you very much for coming out tonight and talking to us. This is great information, and I hope there's a lot of landowners out there that are feeling a little bit more settled in their understanding of easements. I noticed that Jeff highlighted some of the opportunities that are here in Thurston County, the different funding opportunities, and I want to let people know that that'll be the highlight of an upcoming workshop. We'll do a real deep dive into those opportunities here in the county. And Jeff also mentioned again and again the importance of land trusts, and we'll do another workshop where we will introduce landowners to the land trusts that are here locally that you can work with. So folks should know about that. And now I will stop talking and allow you guys to pick Jeff's brain if you have any questions on what he just presented.
And like I said, if there is, if you don't have any questions tonight, you can definitely contact Sierra. And if you have a question of me, I don't have any problem, answering things or, talking through things with you. If you've got a question, just holler. It's so great to see so many familiar faces, for sure. But I kind of say easements are like a jar of coins. If you got a jar of pennies, if you got 100 pennies, it may look like just a buck. But by the time you go through the pennies, you might have a penny in there that's pretty valuable.
My name is Dennis, and I'm the executive director of Veterans Ecological Trades Collective. We're a nonprofit that has 120 acres that was donated to us in South Thurston County about 2 years ago. When this property, you mentioned at the close of your presentation, anywhere from 7 minutes to 7 years. We were about 7 seconds. We got donated this property and I was like, it's going this way. And so I just want to say hello. People on this call that I already am doing work with. I'll send you my email, but we're definitely going this way. We've got 20 acres of the 120 that we've already moved into open space with Thurston County. There's a lot of really unique qualifiers on that, including wetland habitat. On the rest of the property, we've got gopher soils. There's a lot of neat things happening there. And our nonprofit is focused on training veterans in conservation, agriculture, forestry, and ecological design. Ecological design being a broad term for anything from solar power stations to straw bale houses. So I will contact you with my email, and I look forward to turning this 7 seconds of inspiration into 70+ years of conservation easement practices.
Very good. Thank you. Look forward
Thank
to it.
you very
Yeah, this is Ken Miller. Just a general question I might have asked Jeff sometime back. I never did really understand why land conservancies have to be involved. If you're just removing the development rights, what is it that they're doing?
That's a really good question. Why the reason why land trusts are involved is that for a lot of programs, land trusts put the package, the application together. For instance, let's take for instance the Ag Land Easement Program from USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, or the Healthy Forest, easement program, initiative program from the same agency. You have to, our agent, NRCS would only provide up to anywhere from 50 to 70% of the value of the easement. So a match needs to be coming from another source. So the applicant on those two programs cannot apply directly for the program. A land trust has to apply because they have to put the package together for 100% of the value of the easement, showing the federal share in that case, and then where the match is coming from. The federal government does not want to hold the easements in those programs. So that the land trust will hold the easement in those programs, and they will administer the easement. By administer, I mean they will do the annual check to make sure that you haven't gone condo. If you've retired your development rights, that you are honoring the terms and conditions of the easement, the warranty easement deed. So land trusts in that case are putting the application together. They're your representative. They're putting the financial package together. They are holding the easement and administering the easement for, in that case, in those two programs, in perpetuity. That's the way those programs are structured.
Did you want to follow up with anything, Kenneth?
Well, yeah, I'm still confused as to my understanding of the Nisqually Trust or the Nisqually Conservation, the Conservation Futures bought all that. And my understanding, which may be wrong, was the landowners got paid for removing their development rights, and that just got added onto their titles, which restricted what they could do. Right. So the county was the one that controlling. They couldn't, I guess they could do something illegally, whether it's a county or a land trust. So I'm not seeing the value added other than your packaging thing, which I didn't totally understand.
Yeah, I can explain that is that there is a cost to government for administering easements, doing that the annual inspection just to make sure terms and conditions are being met. And so, it's no mystery in my day to, in the years that I've been working with the government, the number of employees have gone down rather significantly. I think our agency is about, probably we've lost maybe 3/4 of our staff. And so, it's driven a lot by that. And so having a land trust hold the easement, administer the easement, do the annual checks, that cost is then passed on to the land trust, and they have much more flexibility to manage that in the future than the government does. And that's a big driver. It's a long-term cost. And when you're budgets are going down and your number of employees are going down, then there's a point of reckoning. And that's really the driver, Ken.
Okay, yeah, I guess.
And that, I think that was a similar thing for the county as well. They didn't want to be in that business because it does take time and money.
But they are in the business to the extent that you can't, if you've removed the development rights and it's on your title,
Correct.
you can't build because
Correct.
the county won't give you a permit.
Correct.
What is there to manage? And I'm getting into the weeds too far here, so.
Yeah. Well,
Can I?
go ahead.
Oh, hi, can you all see me?
Yes. Hi, Michelle.
Hi. So I'm a land steward with the Capital Land Trust, and I volunteer for the yearly monitoring check. And there's quite a bit that goes into it. So it's not just about watching for development, but also we make sure that certain conservation values are being followed. So we'll look for illegal trespassing, we'll look for illegal hunting, we'll just monitor any riparian areas or whatever is very specific to that land trust. We'll also look at invasives and you know, and I think that's about it, but there's quite a bit that goes into actually maintaining the land. And sometimes you may need work parties to go in and do some planting of certain native species and whatnot. So
from the perspective of the funder, you know, your warranty easement deed is the driver of what the annual monitoring is going to be. And that's why I said it's really important to understand what's in that warranty easement deed. The annual monitoring can include a variety of different things dependent on what the parties had agreed upon. And so you are correct. There's some, we've had wetlands reserve program easements that the US government has held. And one of the things in the warranty easement deed is illegal dumping and or camping and something like that. So those things are checked. So those terms and conditions are that are in the warranty easement deed is what drives the monitoring.
So there quite a bit more, there's more detail in them than just removing the development rights, apparently. I'm getting that now. Other follow-up question, when I was on the Ag Advisory Committee, we talked an awful lot about transfer of development rights. Thurston County was, I think, the first one to have a program. It's just not functional, which just seems much clearer, cleaner transaction to me. Is there any hope that we'll actually get a market-driven transfer of development right program in Thurston County?
You know, I can tell you that, and Chris can, you know, speak from the county, but I know that TDR was tried in the past and there wasn't a market for it, as you pointed out, and you've got to have a market. I know that, you know, places like King County, there's obviously more demand. And so, so that has really, you know, there were some early participants that did transfer development rights, and it was not as successful because there was not that demand. And so therefore, purchase of development rights was actually more popular because, you know, it was taking an easement and converting over into you know, funding or money, a cash benefit that a landowner could easily put to use.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to jump in here. I want to make sure we have enough time for our farmer panel. There was one question that Betsy wrote into the chat that I want to put to you, and I want to make sure by 7:30 we've moved on to the farmer panel here. So Betsy asks, if your land is already in a long-term ag zone, what's the likelihood that you might get an easement?
That really is a good question because there's a lot of people out there, and it depends on, like I said, I showed you an earlier slide of what land is basically a bundle of rights and ecological assets. And so if you have any right or ecological asset that's in demand, then potentially you actually might have some additional value to harvest off your land. And so that's where it's a good idea to start talking to land trusts just to get an idea of what you have potentially out there that would be desirable in the marketplace.
Betsy, did you have a follow-up question to that? And if you don't unmute, I'll just assume no.
Nope. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Betsy. Great.
Hey, Sierra, you muted.
That's helpful. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
I'm not even sure where I started. I want to switch over to letting the farmers here who have firsthand experience with this process tell you their story and get them front and center so we can direct questions to them as well. And Jeff can jump back in if he needs to. So tonight we have, I think we have 3 farmers with us. We have Fred Colvin, we have Nate Lewis, and I believe Vivian Thompson is on the line, and Brian Fisher was going to maybe join us, and I'm not sure if I've seen his name yet. So why don't we start with you, Fred, because you're right there in the top corner where I see you. And will you give people kind of the 5-minute story of your experience with conservation easements? And you are also muted.
How's that? Are we good, Sarah?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Okay, very good. Thank you. A pleasure to be here. I think Jeff did a great job, kind of overview of a conservation easement. We have a conservation easement on our place. We're located outside of Toronto, about 2 miles west of Toronto on Old Highway 99. The place consists of about 550 acres. Been in my family since the early 1850s. We got involved with the Grassland Reserve Program, which is a program through NRCS, USDA, about 15 years ago. And eventually got about 90% of the ranch is covered with a conservation easement. The land under the buildings and the barn and the houses are not covered. Plus, I excluded some land kind of around those buildings just to make sure that if I wanted to expand the corral system, I could do it, or if I wanted to add another barn, I could do it. So we kept kind of a buffer between the easement land and those infrastructures that we have on the place that are not part of the easement. So we can build a barn, providing you can get a building permit, of course. We're not in violation of the conservation easement. So our easement is held by NRCS. They do an annual monitoring. The terms and conditions of the easement are many of the things that Jeff talked about, but ours is also specific as to how we manage the grazing on our land. Most of the property, most of the ranch is prairie ground. That's a significant habitat. It's important for a lot of people for various reasons. By the way, we went into the conservation easement before the pocket gopher issue was such a big item that it is now. So anyway, they look at the property once, sometimes twice a year, look at native plants that are growing, how we're managing our grazing. All that is spelled out in a grazing management plan that, interestingly, is not actually part of the public record. So the easement says it'll be managed according to a grazing management plan, but that plan isn't part of the record. So, and that can be changed over years as circumstances change. both for NRCS and for myself. So, you know, I always like to mention why we did it. And it was principally because our ranch had gotten split up over the many years because people die and people inherit and people sell. And when it came down to it, where my dad has a place, I got two sisters, and I didn't want to see the ranch having to be divided up any more than it has been in the past to settle the estate of my mom and dad. So the way we tried to handle that situation is try to take value out of the land and put it in the bank. So we sold the conservation or the development rights, took that value, turned it into cash, and it's a lot easier to settle the estate when you're dealing with cash rather than with the land. And so we eventually, my mom passed away, and we did sell the estate, and it worked as intended. So I was able to basically to buy out my two sisters. So I own the property now, of course, with the conservation easement. You know, just a couple things I'm going to mention, and then I'll let it go. And I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have. But I think it's important when you get involved with whatever kind of organization it is that actually holds the easement, that you really understand the culture of that organization. By that, I mean, do they really believe in a working landscape? Or are they more interested in trying to preserve something, protect something? And there's a difference there. And I think if you're trying to run a farm or a ranch, I think you need to be aware of where that organization is. And I don't mean just the person you're dealing with today, but who is the person you're going to deal with in 20 or 30 years, or who is the person your daughter is going to have to deal with in 40 or 50 years? What kind of an organization is that? So do they culturally really fit into a working landscape? I think maybe that's enough. Is that enough, Sierra? Enough background for what we've done?
That's great, Fred. I'm sure
Okay.
that's encouraging people to ask questions, and I'm going to ask you to hold your questions for Fred until everybody's done the introductions.
Good. All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Fred. That was great. Nate, do you want to go ahead and tell your story in a few minutes?
Sure. And you can hear me all right? I just got to alert my internet's unstable, so apologize.
I hear you great right now.
Super. So hello, folks. My name's Nate Lewis. My wife and I own and operate Oyster Bay Farm out in West Olympia. We are 40 acres on Totten Inlet. It's kind of a diverse operation. We have some timberland, pasture land, and a little bit of cropland. We raise certified organic poultry and eggs, grass-fed beef and lamb. We're starting a forest management plan, so we'll be sustainably harvesting timber from the timber lot. We lease another 12 to 15 acres down the road for more pasture and hay ground. Our experience with the easement is a kind of a different perspective than what Fred described. What we engaged in was what they call in the sort of easement world is a simultaneous sale. Even though our transaction, the simultaneous meant like 4 months apart from one another. Essentially, the way that our deal was structured is the former owners sold a conservation easement to the community farmland trust, and then we purchased the property from the former landowner. So we own the fee, we own the farm with the encumbrance, the easement. And this was attractive to all parties because the former landowners were looking to retire, looking to essentially get the investment that they'd put in the land out. And a lot of times farmers invest in their land, and that really is their retirement plan. So that was their goal. Our goal was to purchase a piece of farmland that allowed us to do the operation that we wanted. But because of land prices and the current realities of and economics of agriculture, this particular piece of property wasn't affordable without the easement on it. So for us as young farmers, without the easement, we wouldn't be here. And it kind of worked out really nicely to use the easement as the tool to reduce the value enough so that we could afford it, but also ensure the landowners are compensated for the overall value of their land. I think it's one of the great things, and I want to echo everyone's comments about getting to know the land trust and making sure that you are a good match for them and they're a good match for you. I think in our situation, it was critical that we, as the future owners of the land, were involved in the negotiations of the easement. So that was really great, and it wasn't always easy, but you know, these are real estate transactions. They require diligence, and they require thinking into the future. So thankfully for us, working with the Community Farm Land Trust was great, because we were at the table. We had a say in the specific terms of the easement. We were allowed to the time to reflect on that and talk to our attorney and come back with compromises and really work through all that. So at the end of the day, we've ended up with a easement that, you know, again, met everyone's goals. It conserved the land in perpetuity. So this particular area where there's a high rate of development, and this 40 acres could have been divided into 5-acre lots. It will be a farm forever. The previous landowners had their investment recuperated, and essentially their retirement made comfortable. We had access to farmland, and the land trust was able to gain an easement, which then provided the opportunity for the land trust to get more easements and apply for additional funding. And again, everyone's goals were met in there. So yeah, just again, to reiterate, it's not always the right match for every piece of property, and every project is going to be unique and have its own specific considerations. But while there are restrictions, and the whole concept of easements is about encumbering land and adding restrictions that reduce flexibility, it's actually quite a malleable tool. So like what Fred described, what's going to work for him is having flexibility around building for new corrals and expanding his operation. The easement was designed around that. In our case, we don't have parts of the farm that are not encumbered by the easement, but we have specific language in the easement around what we can and cannot build, how much we can build, and what the process is for determining whether or not that's appropriate. From our perspective as farmers, we don't feel like that's onerous. We feel like that's reasonable. I could imagine an unscrupulous landowner in the future saying, oh no, this self-storage facility I built here is actually for ag uses, and that would be inappropriate. You know, when we think about building things, it's about compost facilities and pens for animals and that kind of stuff. So the encumbrances, we feel like, because we were part of the negotiation and we're bringing our perspective as farm operators into it, are completely appropriate. And from our perspective as young farmers, without this easement, the overall prospect of purchasing land in the current age would not really be a reasonable or a feasible concept. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Thanks a lot for that story, Nate. That's great. It's obviously a very different story, different process than Fred went through. And I think we're going to hear yet another very different process from Vivian. Vivian, are you ready to take over here for a couple of minutes?
Hello. Our easement was kind of special because our neighbor is actually the one that fought for us for making it the Nisqually Valley easement, keeping it natural. And so our family did sell our easements at the farm, and we picked 3 spots for building houses or something, so we didn't get paid for those 3 spots. But we were able to sell, it was wetlands, and we do hay and stuff on it. But hi Cody. The one nice thing about the easement, the other farm that we did rent, their easement was sold, and when we did the like or kind exchange, the county able to make us like or kind. So we were able to sell the property and buy the other property without the tax things too. So we're able to buy the adjoining land. But that's about,
Yeah.
that one was just kind of a simple one because it was this kind of, you can't really build down there too because it is wetland, but it was able to make for us to be able to buy the other land too.
Fantastic. And what was the reason for you entering into your easement?
Because it was there. It was available, and it kind of just made sense for the family.
Great.
And for the other piece that we did buy, the cousins who got that in an estate, they were able to get, they got their money out of, they sold their easement rights also. So I believe there was 4 farmers that actually sold their easements in the valley.
Great. Thank you, Vivian. So we've got 3 different farmers on the line. Brian, you're not out there, are you? Brian Fisher? Yeah. We've got 3 different farmers on the line here with 3 very different experiences with conservation easements. I've got some questions for them, but I'd rather they come from all of you guys. So I'm gonna be quiet and see if you have any questions for anyone in particular, or just to throw out to the group in general.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Betsy.
So then what happens when Nate or Fred or Vivian die, and the next person, first of all, how do they acquire it? And then like what if they don't want to, like what if you can't find someone who's willing to buy it under the restrictions of the easement? Does that happen? How does that work?
That's a really great question, Betsy, and I think that's a really important factor to consider. And obviously you can't look into the future and see who all the potential buyers are of your property, but you're right, since this isn't perpetuity, by sort of getting some cash advantage now and encumbering the property, you drastically reduce the potential pool of buyers for your property in the future. Not everyone wants to farm, as you and I very well know. So that is certainly part of it, but that's also part of what the appraisal process is. So the understanding of the appraiser is that you're selling to the development rights, so that has an inherent value, but you're also making the property less desirable on an open market simply because it doesn't have the level of flexibility you would have with an unencumbered property.
More affordable.
It's more affordable, right? It's more affordable, sure, but it's not necessarily what everybody's going to want to have. And there are, and to your point as well, there's generally requirements that it stay in at least county open space and meet those kind of income threshold requirements. So it is absolutely important that you consider that. And I think, you know, in my situation where we had the simultaneous sale, I know that was a major part of why the previous landowners wanted to engage in a simultaneous sale, is the concern around having an encumbered piece of property and getting older and not being able to find a buyer for the property. So setting it up in a situation like ours was to their advantage because it reduced the risk that they were thinking that the easement might put on them. And again, everyone's making decisions on their own risk benefit matrix here, right? So things that may seem daunting to someone may not seem daunting to others. And it's just a fact of the matter that you need to consider when you want to engage in such a enterprise.
I have a question that kind of follows up with what Betsy was asking. I know that in East King County, they have a number of parcels that have been preserved through conservation easements. And in the ensuing years, there has been an increase in the number of people with the resources to buy one of those parcels, even if it has a conservation easement on it. They'll buy a 20-acre parcel that, you know, that it has a building envelope. They can build themselves a huge house, and but there's no affirmative requirement for them to keep farming. And so I'm wondering if anybody has explored affirmative easements where farming is a requirement.
So Diane, this is Fred Colvin. Yes, our easement requires us to keep farming. So we have to manage our prairie lands and our grasslands. We choose to use cattle. We could use, I guess, horses, or we could make hay, but our choice is cattle. But we have to keep, in order to protect some of the characteristics of these prairie lands, they have to be managed and used to some extent. So ours, I guess that would be that requirement that we do something. It's just, I mean, there's a lot of things we can't do, obviously, but there's things we have to do. And getting back to Betsy's question, I think, Betsy, you're spot on with your concern. Obviously, the land is worth less money now that you got compensated for the development rights, but can you still find a buyer at that lower value? And that's a tough one.
Well, what I mean actually is not so much, I mean, the owner dies, so it's not their problem anymore. Maybe I'm missing something, but it has to be. Let's say they don't have any heirs.
Well, let's say they do. What difference does it make? I mean, you could, you know, when we're gone, okay, I got kids in line. Well, what if they don't want it? Well, they gotta try and sell it, but it's sold subject to the conditions in the conservation easement.
Okay.
So the new buyer has to come in, and he or she obviously has to say, can I comply with these requirements in that conservation easement? Okay. Now, I personally believe, and it's just a gut feeling, that there's enough people interested in agriculture in this area and in this country that I think an agricultural property exposed to the market will find a buyer, of course, given that the prices are right. But you raise an interesting and challenging issue. Yes.
I can answer also or add to that. As when I worked for USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, we were holders of several easements, and also too, I participated in many land transactions. And so when a property was listed, we've had clients come in that were that had seen that on their title search that there is an easement on it, had a copy of it, wanted to sit down. These are potential buyers to meet our agency as a holder of an easement and get some questions answered. So that dialogue was really valuable. And in the end, and all of the easements that we had, the transactions, you know, all the easements that we held, the private landowner who sold the easement made a successful sale. As there were, I can think of several new easement holders, the second generation, that actually were very much interested and found that particular easement on that parcel fit well with what they wanted to do with the property. So I was surprised. Yeah, that hasn't been a major issue. There's a lot of buyers out there interested in that sort of thing.
Thank you.
This is Deston Denniston with the Veterans Ecological Trades Collective. And I think this question may be directed towards Sarah Moorhead, but anybody who has ideas about it may please feel free to step in. In Thurston County, the number of veteran farmers that are registered through FSA is about 17%, which is double the Washington state average. And that's largely a result of the veterans that come out of the gate at JBLM, look at Thurston County, and they're like, hey, I'd like to settle down here. Might want a job where I'm the boss. And they get into farming. Pierce County runs a little bit less than us, but is also very high. We're gaming at our property on the idea that we're going to let go of a major portion of the property to veteran operators who we want to sell our property to in easements. And this gets back to Betsy's question, and why I think this may be directed towards Sarah is, where is FarmLink and the arrangements for finding beginning farmer ranchers and matching them with suitable lands in Thurston County? How are we positioned to make sure that that almost double the state average number of veteran farmers that are coming out and landing right here in our local community are gathered, harvested, and put it onto land, so that farmers like Betsy don't end up with this question of who's going to end up with this, who's going to want it? And that basically is my question. And I think many people may have ideas about that, but Sarah, I'm hoping that you have notions about FarmLink and how those programs might help place potential farmers with potential available land, so that we can ensure that they get positioned to preserve this rural character in our county.
Thanks for
Yeah,
that.
thanks, Destin. I think that's a really great question. FarmLink and other land matching type programs that are out there are designed to do just that, to try and begin to bridge that gap between landowners and folks that are looking to access land. And there's a lot of work to do, and there's more work to do for sure on that in this community. They start to scratch that surface as far as creating those relationships and taking inventories of both folks that are looking and folks that have land, and start to facilitate those relationships in a fashion where maybe those individuals wouldn't naturally have met. So it's definitely a resource that's out there and valuable. For those of you that don't know, our conservation district operates the South Sound FarmLink program. And so through that, we are able to identify a lot of trends for folks that are looking for land and folks that have land that are looking to try and create a relationship with a new producer, or looking to set up some sort of successional planning for the next generation. And I will say that on all sides, it's not an answer that solves the whole puzzle. So it's a piece of the puzzle, and it definitely takes a whole lot more involved. And so we have more work to do for FarmLink style programs to be more holistically supported, better funded. They take a lot of time, a lot of capacity, a lot of networking in the community, a lot of education, a lot of meetings like this, where we can have producers virtually or non-virtually sitting around together and having conversation about options that are available for their land and how they want to design them in the future. I do think it's a valuable tool. I think it's one worth investing in here in our community as one of the avenues to create those bridges to help take new and interested producers, help train them, and help provide them with pathways for land access. But it's a matchmaking system, and it doesn't alone by itself solve some of these other challenges that we're talking about tonight, where like land affordability, things like that, where easements are a tool to bring down costs for new farmers and compensate retiring farmers. So it's a piece of that puzzle, and it's a complex puzzle for sure. I'm not sure if that answered your question in its entirety though. Let me know if I didn't.
I could add something. I'm not sure if I know what I'm talking about, but a neighboring farmer had been looking for someone to kind of start working on their farm, and the future as far as maybe they're going to buy it is unknown, but they were using ATRA, and I hate to use acronyms and not be able to say what they are, but I don't remember what ATRA stands for. It's a federal program. Can someone, Jeff, you must know what ATRA is. Hello?
Appropriate technology transfer, something.
Yes. Well, anyway, I'm just tossing that out there. But that, I think, is more for finding people who want to work with you on your farm.
So Betsy, there's a national Farmland type program out there
Yeah, I think so.
through ATRA. Okay. For rural America, appropriate technology transfer for rural America.
This is Fred Colvin. I think I saw a written question for me from Ken Miller. Is Ken still there?
Good. Yeah, take that, Fred.
But I don't see the question
Oh, okay.
flashed up.
Did he interpret correctly that you were having second thoughts about your easement because Gophers came online after you got your easement and therefore you missed out on some conservation dollars, or can you cash in on that now somehow?
I don't know if I can cash in on it. To answer the second question first, the first question is no, I'm not having second thoughts at all. The whole gopher issue, basically I just kind of ignore it. We got gophers all over this place, and they get along with my cattle get along with them, and that's all I really care about. Now again, if I wanted to build a barn, I'd have to go through whatever the gopher review is, go through that. That would be a different question, but the day-to-day operation, year to year, for me, it hasn't been an issue. If there's a way to cash in on gophers now, let me know, or just send a check.
Thank you, Fred. Hey guys, we are 1 minute from 8, and I want to allow people to graciously disappear here. I'm not going to shut off good conversation if there's more questions and people want to stick around and answer them, but I also want to allow people to have their evening. So I want to say thank you.
Maybe repost. So you might want to repost the eval. Sorry to interrupt. I want to just make sure that you.
Thank you for doing that.
You have to say it.
No, I would have forgotten. So yeah, please take the 3 minutes to fill out the eval because we want to make these better for you going forward. So if you tell us what we didn't answer, what you want to know next time, then we can make sure and cover that. All right. Thank you guys.
And I just posted that evaluation once again at the bottom of the chat. So it's at the top and the bottom.
Great.
Thanks, Sierra. Good job. Thanks
Absolutely.
to everyone who spoke.
Yeah. Special thank you for the farmers that donated their time tonight. Fred, Nate, Vivian.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Those of us who were late getting here, is there going to be a posted link for the recording?
Yes, we're recording, and it looks like it's going to be posted both on the Extension website and on the Conservation District website.
Awesome. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. Look very forward to more. Have a great evening.
Destan, it was great to hear your voice again.
Hey, Sierra, be well. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Jeff, nice work. Sam, awesome.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all the farmers for joining.
Really appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you.
Good to see everybody.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you again, Jeff.
Hey, likewise, Fred and Ken Miller, I'll give you a call. And like I say, other people that need my contact information, I don't have any problem, you guys sharing things. So
Sure.
people know how to get a hold of me anyway. They know where.
You look a heck of a lot less stressed now than you did.
Oh yeah, no bags in my eyes. Yeah.
All righty.
All right, thanks. See ya.
Good. Take care. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, guys.
I guess we're done here somehow.
I think we're done, Fred. Thank you so much.
I hit leave. Hit the red button. All right. Bye-bye.
Only if you want to leave.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.
See you, Cheryl.
Hey, question for Sierra.
Yeah.
I have a document with a summary of all my results.
From tonight's.
For like each question, is there a way to post that online or?
It's like a PDF document, something smallish?
It can be.
It can be.
Well, it can be a PDF. It's 35 pages long.
Okay. I don't know what we want to do with that, to be
Okay.
honest.
Because I couldn't go through everything, I thought if people wanted to know. But if nobody's looking for it, then there's no need to post it.
When we post,
I can also email it to you, Sarah.
I'm going to stop this